If a guy can't stop thinking about you, he's going to act like you barely cross his mind. And if he's doing these 8 things, you're living in his head way more than you realize. You're probably missing every single sign because you're looking for the wrong stuff. Here's what's going to mess with your head. Guys don't act more interested when they think about you constantly. They act normal. Sometimes they even pull back. Not because they're not into you, but because you're in their head so much that it freaks them out and they don't want you to know. I'm going to tell you something that goes against everything you've been told about guys who like you. The man who thinks about you all the time isn't doing the obvious stuff. He's not texting you constantly. He's not always available. He's not making it super clear. Instead, he's doing these weird little things that don't make sense until you understand what's actually going on in his head. Small things he doesn't even realize he's doing. Things that show you've gotten inside his brain in a way that's making him act completely different. Most women think that when a guy really likes them, he'll make it obvious. He'll text more, call more, show more effort, be super consistent. But here's the truth that years of actually talking to guys has taught me. The men who think about you the most, the ones who can't get you out of their head, don't act like that at all. They act confused. They do things that seem like they contradict each other. They give you mixed signals, not because they're playing games, but because they're genuinely trying to figure out what's happening to them. Think about how guys actually talk about women they couldn't stop thinking about. They don't say, I decided to pursue her harder. They say stuff like, I couldn't get her out of my head, or she just got in my brain somehow, or I'd be doing something random and suddenly think about her and it annoyed me. Because guys don't decide to think about you all the time. It's something that happens to them. And when it does, they try to hide it because admitting someone has taken over their thoughts feels like giving away control. The 8 signs we're about to go through aren't the ones you've been looking for. They're not romantic. They're not always flattering. Some of them might even make you think he's not that into you. But they're the real signs, the honest ones, the ones that show what's actually happening inside a guy's head when he thinks about you way more than he wants to admit to himself. So if you've been confused about whether a guy likes you, if his behavior doesn't match what you think interest looks like, if he seems into you one day and distant the next, this is your answer. These 8 signs aren't about what he's saying or what he's trying to show you. They're about what he can't help doing when you're taking up way more space in his brain than he planned. Before we get into the 8 signs, let's talk about what it actually looks like when a guy thinks about you constantly, because this is where most women get it completely wrong. Thinking about someone all the time isn't the same as being attracted to them or even liking them. It's deeper than that. It's when you go from being someone he enjoys talking to someone who pops into his head at random times, someone he wonders about when you're not around, someone who's started to matter in a way that changes how he acts. Guys are really good at handling attraction. They know what to do with it. They can flirt, they can text, they can play it cool. But thinking about someone constantly, that's different. That's not something they can control or plan for. It just happens. And when it does, it messes with their normal behavior in ways they don't even realize. Most guys won't even admit they're thinking about someone that much until way after it's already happened. They'll deny it to their friends. They'll convince themselves it's just casual. Because admitting you think about someone all the time means admitting they have power over you now. It means admitting you care what happens. And guys really don't like feeling that exposed until they're sure it's worth it. So the signs we're looking for aren't about what a guy is choosing to do. They're about what he can't help doing. The things that slip out even when he's trying to play it cool. The behaviors that show what's really going on underneath whatever act he's putting on. These are the signs that separate guys who are just casually interested from guys who are actually thinking about you constantly, even if they haven't figured it out yet themselves. The first sign that a guy is thinking about you constantly that nobody talks about is he gets really quiet when you're actually together, not louder. Every dating tip tells you that if a guy likes you, he'll talk more, engage more, be more outgoing. But here's what actually happens in real life. When a guy can't stop thinking about you, he talks less when you're face to face, not awkward silence less, not boring less. But this specific thing where he's listening way more than he's talking, watching you more than performing, paying attention to everything you say like it actually matters to him. Here's what's happening in his head that he'd never say out loud. When you're just someone he's casually into, talking to you is easy. He can joke around, mess around, say whatever comes to mind. But when you start becoming someone he thinks about all the time, someone whose opinion actually matters, his brain starts doing this thing where it thinks twice about everything before it comes out. A guy who thinks about you constantly doesn't just fill silence anymore. He thinks before he speaks. He filters himself. Not because he's being fake, but because you've become someone he doesn't want to mess up with. Most women think when a guy goes quiet, he's losing interest. But watch what else he's doing while he's quiet. Is he looking at you? Is he paying attention to every single thing you say? Does he remember tiny details from your conversations that even you forgot? Because that's not someone checking out. That's someone who's so locked in that he's gone into full listening mode. Think about it like this. When something doesn't matter to you, you just talk at it. When something really matters to you, you actually listen to it. So when a guy shifts from being the talker to being the listener, that's not him losing interest. That's him caring more than he knows how to handle. You can tell the difference between disinterested quiet and this kind of quiet by watching his body language. The guy who's losing interest will be looking around, checking his phone, seeming distracted. The guy who thinks about you constantly will have his full attention on you. His eyes won't wander. He won't be fidgeting with his phone. He'll be completely present even if he's not saying much. That presence is the sign. That focus is what shows you he's not just listening in the moment, he's taking in everything because you matter enough for his brain to want to remember it all. The second sign he thinks about you all the time is he brings you up in conversations that have nothing to do with you. Not in an obvious way, but in this weird way where he finds a reason to mention you or reference something you said even when nobody asked. His friends are talking about something random and he goes, "Oh, that reminds me, she told me about..." Or you're texting about one thing and he suddenly brings up something completely different that you mentioned days ago. Here's what's happening. When someone is constantly on your mind, everything reminds you of them. Your brain starts connecting random stuff back to that person. So a guy who thinks about you all the time will be living his normal life and something will happen that makes him think of you. And he can't help but bring it up. He's not trying to show you he thinks about you. He's just genuinely making connections between his life and you because you're always somewhere in his thoughts. When a guy keeps finding reasons to bring you into conversations where you don't even belong, that's not him trying to be nice. That's you living in his head so much that you've become part of how he processes everything else. Pay attention to how often your name comes up when you're not even the topic. Does he reference things you've said in totally unrelated conversations? Does he compare new experiences to things you've told him about? Does he mention you to his friends even when the conversation has nothing to do with you? Most guys don't do this with people who are just casual in their life. They do it with people who have become a constant presence in their thoughts. So when he keeps weaving you into his everyday conversations, that's his brain showing you where you actually rank in his mental space. The third sign is he remembers stuff you said forever ago that you don't even remember saying. Not the big important stuff. Everyone remembers big stuff. But the tiny random comments you made in passing that didn't seem important at all. Your random opinion about something. That weird story you told one time. The small detail about your day you mentioned once and forgot about. Here's what's going on. When someone doesn't really matter to you, your brain treats conversations like they're just happening in the moment. You hear it, you respond, you move on. But when someone is constantly in your thoughts, your brain switches into this mode where it saves everything, not on purpose, not because he's trying to remember, but because his brain has decided you're worth keeping track of at a deeper level. A guy who thinks about you constantly will bring up something you said 2 months ago like it was yesterday. And when you look at him confused because you don't even remember it, that's the sign. That's the proof that you're taking up way more space in his head than casual interest would explain. This happens because when someone is on your mind all the time, your brain replays conversations with them. So things you said get reinforced in his memory over and over without him even trying. He'll be going about his day and remember something you told him and it'll make him smile. Or he'll be doing something and recall a detail you mentioned and suddenly think about you. All of that mental replay means the stuff you say doesn't just get heard and forgotten. It gets saved and revisited because you're someone his brain keeps going back to. The fourth sign he's thinking about you constantly is he checks in on stuff you told him about even when you didn't ask him to. You mentioned you had a stressful thing happening at work, and days later he asks how it went. You told him about a problem you were dealing with, and he follows up about it without you bringing it up again. You said you were worried about something, and he remembers to check if it turned out okay. Here's what guys think but don't say when you're just casually dating someone. You don't keep track of their life like that. You don't remember their problems. You don't follow up on their stress. But when someone is constantly on your mind, their stuff becomes your stuff in your head. So you find yourself actually caring about how things turned out for them, not because you decided to care, but because when you think about someone all the time, you genuinely want to know they're okay. When a guy keeps checking in on things you mentioned in passing, that's not him being polite. That's him thinking about you enough that your problems actually stick in his brain. The key here is that he remembers to follow up without you reminding him. Most people forget what you tell them about your life unless it's really major. But a guy who thinks about you constantly will remember that presentation you were nervous about, tea, doctor's appointment you had, that difficult conversation you needed to have, and he'll check in about it because he's been thinking about whether it went okay. That level of attention to your life doesn't come from casual interest. It comes from someone whose brain is tracking your well-being because you've become important to them. The fifth sign is he acts different when other guys are around you or when you mention other guys. Not jealous different, not controlling different, but this subtle shift in his energy that shows up when the topic of you with someone else comes up. If you mention a guy friend, does his whole vibe change a little? Does he get quieter? Does he suddenly seem less engaged? Does he ask questions about it that seem casual, but you can tell he actually cares about the answer? Here's what's happening underneath. When a guy thinks about you constantly, his brain starts treating you like you're his even before anything official has happened. So other guys stop being just random people. They become possible competition for something he's already invested in mentally. And even though he knows he doesn't have the right to feel weird about it yet, he feels it anyway. Because when you think about someone all the time, you don't want to think about them thinking about someone else. A guy who's into you casually won't care about other guys. A guy who thinks about you constantly will try to act like he doesn't care. And that effort is the actual sign. Watch how he reacts when you talk about hanging out with male friends or co-workers. Does he get a little too interested in the details? Does he want to know who was there and what happened? Does his mood shift slightly even though he's trying to keep it neutral? That's not him being controlling. That's him being unable to fully hide that the idea of you with other guys bothers him, because in his head you're already someone special to him, and other guys represent a threat to something he's been thinking about way more than he's ready to admit. The sixth sign he thinks about you all the time is he starts doing this thing where he finds excuses to extend your time together without being obvious about it. You're about to leave and he suddenly thinks of one more thing to show you or tell you. You say you should probably go and he suggests doing just one more thing. Your conversation is wrapping up and he finds a way to keep it going just a little longer. Here's what's going on in his head. When someone is constantly in your thoughts, being around them feels right and leaving them feels wrong. So guys who think about you all the time will unconsciously try to stretch out every interaction because ending it doesn't feel good. He's not planning it. He's not being strategic about it. His brain just doesn't want the interaction to end because you're the person it wants to be focused on. When a guy keeps finding small reasons to keep you around longer, that's not him being chatty. That's him not wanting to go back to just thinking about you instead of actually being with you. Notice how he acts when your time together is coming to an end. Does he suddenly become more talkative? Does he bring up new topics right when you're about to leave? Does he walk you to your car or the door really slowly? Does he linger like he's not ready for it to be over? Guys who don't think about you much are fine with you. Guys who think about you constantly will find ways to stretch out every minute, because actually being with you is better than just having you in their head, which is where you spend most of their time anyway. The seventh sign is he gets genuinely affected by your mood in a way that changes his mood. Not in a surface level, oh, that sucks way, but in this real way where if you're upset, he seems actually bothered by it. If you're happy, his energy lifts. If you're stressed, you can see it actually gets to him. Our emotional state directly impacts his emotional state. When a guy thinks about you constantly, your happiness becomes connected to his happiness. Your bad day becomes his bad day. Not because he's decided to care that much, but because his brain has started treating your well-being as important to his well-being. So when something's wrong with you, it genuinely bothers him. Most women think this is just a guy being supportive, but support is listening and saying nice things. This is different. This is him being unable to feel totally fine when you're not fine. That level of emotional connection doesn't happen with casual interest. It happens when you've been on someone's mind so much that their brain has linked your feelings to their feelings. You can test this without even meaning to. Notice what happens when you're having a bad day and you tell him about it. Does he just say sympathetic things and move on, or does he genuinely seem affected by it? Does your stress become his stress? Does he seem unsettled until you feel better? Does your good mood actually make him lighter? That emotional mirroring isn't something guys do on purpose. It's something that happens automatically when someone has become so present in their thoughts that their emotional state matters on a deeper level. The eighth sign he's thinking about you constantly is he starts including you in his future plans without making it a big deal. Not huge future stuff like moving in together. Small future stuff. Next month, next season. Listen to how he talks about things coming up. Does he say we should about stuff that's weeks away? Does he mention wanting to do something with you when the weather changes? Does he talk about events down the line and automatically assume you'll be there? Here's what guys won't admit. They don't make future plans with people they're not thinking about seriously, even small future plans, because making plans implies you're picturing that person still being around. It implies continuity, and guys avoid that with people they're not invested in. But when a guy thinks about you constantly, making plans months out feels natural because in his head, you're already a fixture in his future. He's not thinking about whether you'll still be around. He's just assuming you will be. And that assumption is everything. Pay attention to how naturally he includes you in things that haven't happened yet. Does he mention a concert in 2 months and say, we should go to that? Does he talk about summer plans and automatically include you? Does he reference holidays or events down the line like you'll obviously be together? Most guys are very careful about not making future plans with someone unless they're serious about them. So when a guy casually assumes you'll be part of his future without even questioning it, that's because in his mind, you already are. You're not someone temporary he's hanging out with. You're someone he thinks about constantly and can't picture his future without. Let me show you what happens when you actually understand these 8 signs. Think about a woman who was seeing a guy who seemed hot and cold. She thought he wasn't that interested because he didn't text much. But when she started paying attention to these signs, she realized he was doing all of them, getting quiet around her, bringing her up in random conversations, remembering everything she said. He wasn't pulling back, he was thinking about her constantly and didn't know how to handle it. Or think about another woman who almost ended things because the guy seemed too casual, but she noticed he kept extending their time together. He checked in on things she mentioned days ago. He got weird when she talked about other guys. When she recognized that, everything clicked. He wasn't being casual. He just didn't want to show how much he was thinking about her. Understanding these signs doesn't just help you figure out if a guy likes you. It helps you see what's actually happening versus what you think should be happening. Because here's the truth. Guys thinking about you constantly rarely looks like what movies and dating advice told you it would look like. It looks messier, more confusing, more human. And if you're waiting for the perfect obvious signs, you're going to miss the real ones that actually matter. So here's what you do with this information. First, pay attention to behavior shifts, not consistency. The guy who thinks about you constantly isn't going to act the same the whole time. He's going to act different as you become more important in his head. Those changes are the sign. Watch for the shift from casual to careful, from surface to deep, from present to future. Second, trust the small things over the big things. Grand gestures are easy. Remembering a random comment from 2 months ago isn't. Being genuinely affected by your mood isn't. Automatically including you in future plans isn't. The small things he doesn't control tell you way more than the intentional stuff. Third, look for the things he can't fake. Anyone can decide to text you. Not everyone can control whether they bring you up in random conversations, whether they remember tiny details, whether other guys bother them. The signs that matter are the ones he's not trying to show you. They're the ones that leak out because he's thinking about you too much to hide it completely. Fourth, notice what sticks in his brain. Guys don't remember random details about people they don't think about. They don't follow up on stuff that doesn't matter to them. They don't keep track of your problems unless you're constantly on their mind. When a guy's brain is saving information about you without him even trying, that's real. That's not something he can fake or force. Fifth, watch what bothers him. A guy who doesn't think about you much won't be bothered by much. Your stress is your stress. Other guys are other guys. But a guy who thinks about you constantly will be bothered by things that affect you and things that threaten you being available to him. That emotional reaction isn't something he can fake. It's either real or it's not there at all. Sixth, stop comparing his behavior to what you think interest should look like and start comparing it to how he acts with everyone else. Does he get quieter around you but louder around others?